I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Mohamed bin Chambas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to address the Security Council at this open debate. While thanking you, Mr. President, for the kind invitation to address this council, allow me to take this opportunity to congratulate you and your government for convening this important open debate on the impact of development policies in the implementation of the Silencing the Guns initiative of the African Union. Speaking of which, I'd like also to join USG Cristiano Duarte to commend you, your government, the people of Mozambique, for providing an example of a successful peace process, which I believe could be a model for lesson sharing on our continent. When the AU heads of state and government adopted the Silencing the Guns STG initiative, they were motivated by the desire to bequeath future generations of Africans a continent free of wars and conflicts. The objective was to work for an Africa at peace with itself and with the rest of the world. The UN Security Council, consistent with AU-UN strategic partnership, rallied behind this initiative by adopting Resolution 2457. The topic of this important debate is timely. It is coming at a moment when Africa is faced with multiple challenges that put at risk the attainment of the noble objectives of silencing the guns, even by the new date of 2030. The causes of these challenges are historical, constitutional, institutional, economic, social, and cultural. They relate also to the impact of climate change. Africa's vulnerability to global economic shocks and weak implementation of protocols and decisions taken at national, sub-regional, continental, and international levels regarding peace and security and development of the African continent are also contributory factors. Regrettably, we are also witnessing a widening gap between rich nations and poorer nations on the international scene, and at the national levels between elites and marginalized and poor communities and peoples. It is estimated that the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, has wiped out most of the gains in Africa by increasing the number of persons living in extreme poverty. The UNSC Economic Report for Africa 2021 observed that COVID-19 pandemic pushed 55 million Africans into poverty in 2020 and reversed more than 2 decades of progress in poverty reduction on the continent. Equally alarming is the fact that 15 African countries are reportedly at risk of debt distress. In fact, the total African debt that was forgiven under the Multilateral Debt Relief Initiative 2 decades ago was in the region of $300 billion. Today, once again, Africa is in debt to the tune of more than $600 billion. Going forward, we could and we should foster recovery and transformation in Africa to reduce inequalities and vulnerabilities, thereby getting us closer to silencing the guns. And I'd like to highlight 1 or 2 issues. First, Africa must embark on people-centered recovery and transformation. Africa must give prominence to investment in human capital development and utilization, The major elements of this are investment in education and science, the focus on employability, investment in technology and innovation, investment in health, harnessing the demographic dividend by, among others, investing in the growth of decent employment opportunities, leveraging the African diaspora, mainstreaming the informal sectors into the formal sectors, investing in gender equality and youth empowerment, and investing in the development of morality, integrity, discipline, self-esteem, and self-confidence. 2, for this transformation to be attained and sustained, there's need to secure abundant financial resources. In this respect, mobilization of domestic resources should be prioritized with a particular emphasis on fighting against illicit financial flows, which deprive the continent of approximately US$ 90 billion annually. 3, digital technologies offer us a chance to unlock new pathways for rapid and inclusive economic growth, innovation, job creation, and access to services. Africa has several headline successful and dynamic ecosystems. The mobile money revolution is a well-known example. So are the cultural industries, particularly music and filmmaking. 4, the development of agro-parks aimed at making Africa food secure and later a net food exporter. It is untenable that a continent with 60% of the world's remaining arable lands and many rivers and freshwater bodies should be dependent for its grains on external sources. The agro-parks will also, through specialization, promote regional and continental value chains in agriculture. 5, sustainable industrialization is another key focus area. Here, collaboration with partners could involve building capacities for rural cooperatives, agro-processing, building capacities for production of intermediate goods from Africa's vast array of natural resources, building capacities to mainstream research and development to boost innovation and development of regional and continental value chains. 6, the African Continental Free Trade Area market has a bright future. We have a young population with a growing middle class whose demand for industrial goods is 1.5 times than the global average. We must create a made-in-Africa standard, which, when operationalized, will promote competitiveness among qualifying companies, as well as contribute to removal of technical barriers to trade. The process of deglobalization is underway, and Africa has, since the 1970s, experienced progressive decline of its share of global trade from 6% to 2.7% currently. The African Union, by adopting the AfTA, is still committed to international trade. It is, among others, a source of foreign exchange and transfer of technology. The AfTA plans to move Africa to a paradigm shift away from a producer and exporter of raw materials to an exporter of manufactured and agro-processed goods and services such as tourism and labor. To do so, there's urgent need for investment in national and cross-border infrastructures to facilitate free movement of persons, goods, and services. Although Africa is the least contributor, and this is my 7th point, to global warming, it is committed to playing its part in the green transition, albeit at a variable speed. New estimates by the African Development Bank show that Africa will need between 1.18 to 1.45 billion US dollars annually to implement its commitments to the Paris Agreement and its nationally determined contributions. In this regard, climate financing, carbon credit trading, and other mechanisms should be made a reality through simplified, flexible, and quick disbursement methods to release the required funds to meet Africa's climate financing gap. As I conclude, Mr. President, allow me to reiterate what the UN and the AU have repeatedly underscored, and it has been repeated again by USG Duarte, namely the nexus between peace, security, development, governance, and respect for human rights. These are the mantra of both the UN Sustainable Goals, SDGs, and the AU Agenda 2063. In that regard, the discussion today is intrinsically linked with that of the 28th March high-level debate held by this August Council on counter-terrorism. The scourge of international terrorism, conflict, and instability in Africa that are driven by internal and external factors impact negatively the prospects for sustained development and addressing the pressing needs of the people. The recent unconstitutional changes of government and the re-emergence of coup d'etat must also be addressed. The AU and its regs continue to adopt measures of strengthening conflict prevention and mediation, ensuring good governance, strengthening democratic institutions, enhancing the role of women, and empowering youth at the sub-regional, national, and community levels. Silencing the guns will require its ownership by the sub-regions, the national governments, but above all, by the African peoples and active civil society. The support of Africa's partners and friends is also required. The UN, through this august body, has already expressed its solidarity on silencing the guns. The support of multilateral and bilateral partners will also go a long way in helping to silence the guns by 2030 and to help us realize a peaceful, secure, democratic, participative, inclusive, and prosperous Africa, the Africa we want by 2063. And I thank you.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Chambas for his briefing.